This is Better Brain Briefs. We are talking about how to heal from brain injuries. And today I want to talk about what brain injury takes away. But first, I have a question. Somebody actually asked a question. And if you have questions about brain injuries, the experience of brain injuries, and how to heal from them, then ask. I may or may not have answers, but ask. Want questions? So, how quickly does the brain's neural network recover after a brain injury? I know people can relearn functions, but do the brain cells actually regenerate? Terrific question. So I want to answer the second part of this first. Do brain cells actually regenerate? I remember being in school years ago and learning that when you lose a neuron, that's it. You don't get new ones. So that really created this belief that if you lose it, that's all. You can't heal it. Science has now shown that is not correct. You actually form new nerve connections until the day you die. Until the moment of death, and even after death, it's possible that your brain is still doing things in there with your nervous system, making new connections, new synapses between the neurons. And then there is neurogenesis, the ability to actually make new nerve cells. So you can regenerate your nerves. You can regenerate things that have lost your ability to wire around it. It's called neuroplasticity. Plasticity of the nervous system, the ability to make new connections when something has been lost. And as I have been talking about combat brain training, the technique that I'm using now, I've been talking more about neuroplasticity. So when we are using combat brain training, this chart of arrows, what we're doing with it gets pretty repetitive. Over and over and over again, I have people say the arrows. Why are we doing that? We are giving the demand, the call for performing this function over and over and over to the brain. We are giving it a stimulus frequently. And by doing that, we are saying, hey, this is important. This is something I want. And if we are requiring the brain to do something that right now, maybe because of injury or maybe for other reasons, but for right now, it's not able to do it, it feels difficult. When I first have people read the chart, depending on how injured they are, it may be really hard reading the chart. And that's okay. I started working with somebody who had a stroke yesterday, and he really struggled with the chart. That's okay. By demanding, saying, I need this, I need this, I need this, every time you read the chart, you're putting the same requirement into the brain. You're saying to the brain, this is important. I really want this to work. And so your brain says, oh, we need to build that back in. I need to take an area of the brain that is not functioning right now. In the case of a stroke, there's an area of the brain that has died off because blood got into the brain. And blood is toxic to brain tissue. There's the blood-brain barrier normally that keeps them separated. So when there is a leak in that blood vessel that goes into the brain tissue, that then damages the brain tissue when it doesn't work. So the function that is performed by that area of the brain doesn't work. You might not be able to talk very well. You might not be able to move very well. You might not be able to see very well. Might not be able to walk. All these different things that get lost when the injury to the brain occurs. Okay? So there's this function that is required to speak, for example, or to be able to recognize an arrow on the chart, right? These are skills that I'm requiring people to be able to do. So by requiring that function over and over and over again, communicating to the brain, this is important, we need it. And the brain says, okay, and it builds a new nerve connection. If this is a function that's not happening, not able to be performed, the nervous system takes one nerve here and another nerve here, and it connects them up. You have nerves have a cell body, and then it's got an axon, a long stem with branches on the end, and it's got dendrites here and branches on the end. Okay, so the dendrites are here, and they receive signals from other neurons, give it to the cell body. It then goes down the axon and then sends it out to the other neurons. There's other neurons here, right? So you have one neuron with dendrites here and a neuron with axon here, and they make a connection. They send a signal from this axon to this dendrite, so it goes to this cell body, then it goes down this neuron, and then out those axons to other dendrites, to other neurons. Okay, these are called synapses. Between the dendrites and the axons, there's a synapse. So if this neuron is receiving a signal and it passes it to this one, that's a synapse. Okay, so your nervous system does this for everything. For me, just doing this requires like many thousands, zillions of nerve connections communicating to make this function. Okay, every function in your body requires this nervous system connection. So if this function in the brain is not working properly, and I require the function, the brain is going to say, we need to be able to do that. And so it's going to take a neuron and a neuron, it's going to connect them up, and there's a synapse that's going to occur, a chemical communication. A neurotransmitter goes from one nerve to the next nerve to be able to establish that function, and then it continues going down the line so that ultimately the function that is required by this area of the brain is restored. You're building it again. So when my friend asked, do brain cells actually regenerate? New nerve connections form. It's not necessarily complete regeneration. And then sometimes you can have a whole new nerve come into place, be born. Neurogenesis is what it's called. So yes, we can relearn functions that have been lost, and brain cells and nervous system connections do regenerate. How quickly does the brain's neural network recover after a brain injury? How quickly it is, it depends on how much damage there is. If it's just like I stood up underneath a cabinet door and I gave myself a minor concussion, there was very minor damage that occurred. There wasn't enough damage to cause death of brain cells. So I recovered from that pretty quickly. Within a couple hours, maybe a day. I hit my head really hard, but it was just one injury. And it wasn't so bad that there was actual tissue damage to the brain. When, my person had a stroke, there was actually so much damage to the area that brain tissue dies. If there is an accident that is so hard, like getting in a car accident, hitting the windshield, and the brain, we have to talk about this. So here's the skull, okay? And there's the brain inside, and then there's cerebral spinal fluid that's surrounding the brain inside the skull. And it protects and nourishes the brain and the spinal cord. The same cerebral spinal fluid goes down the inside of the vertebral column, down to the tailbone, and it nourishes and protects the brain and the spinal cord. So when I'm in a car accident, or when I fall, or when something hits my head, the brain inside there bounces around. And it's good that it does this. It keeps it protects it, having the ability to move inside there, because if it were like attached to the skull, like the brain were just attached to the skull, there would be no ability to move in there. So anytime I hit my head, it's going to do damage to the brain. So the cerebrospinal fluid in there absorbs some of the impact So there's less actual impact on the brain. So say I had hit my head on the cabinet, but there wasn't the cerebrospinal fluid. That would have damaged my brain. So having the cerebrospinal fluid around it protects the brain from being damaged. So when I hit the windshield, okay, my brain bounces back and bounces forward. So, you've heard of whiplash in car accidents where, you hit something and you go forward and then you go back and then you go forward again. That process of moving forcefully forward and forcefully back and forcefully forward causes the brain inside there to woo, 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 woo. And each time the brain hits the skull, it gets a little bit bruised. That's what a concussion is. When this happens and the brain gets bruised. So when that happens, there's this whiplash effect, and the brain bouncing around in there, running into the walls every time, and it damages the brain. Depending on how intense it is, it might be just bruising the brain, or it might actually crush the brain tissue. Brain tissue is like the consistency of tofu or jello. It's soft and squishy. It's very fragile. That's why it needs this very hard box that it's inside to protect it from anything that's hitting it. So, but in this injury process, the brain bounces around in there and it gets damaged. It gets bruised. So how quickly does it recover after brain injury? Depends on how badly it's injured. If it's just a concussion where it's got these bruises to the brain, that probably will not cause permanent damage. The ability of the brain to recover from that exists. It's able to heal itself. It's possible there might be residual damage. We just don't know. It depends on how badly it is damaged. But when you have an injury that's so bad that the physical tissue of the brain is crushed or, like dug into by something or, like seriously damaged, then the recovery for that is much more extensive and it takes a lot longer. And when that really serious damage occurs, whether it's, like with a stroke, like I was talking about, and this area dies off, some of that tissue dies, so the neurons die, and they will not come back as they were. You can build new nerve connections around it, and that is taking the function that you need and building it newly. You're not going to have it be exactly the way it was before. You basically have to learn it again. So, listening to people talk about having lost the ability to speak from a stroke, for example. One of my friends completely lost all the ability to speak. And he speaks now normally. It's not exactly the same as before. He had to relearn how to speak. And, this friend of mine was a public speaker, a keynote speaker. And he had lots of recordings of himself giving speeches. So he listened to his speeches over and over and over again, relearning how he used to speak. So if there's an area that's not functioning, when you regain that ability, say this ability to speak very well, you form it newly. You build it from zero. Start from nothing and build it in. So how long does that take? It depends. If it's a minor injury, it can be pretty quick. It really helps if you receive treatment. So anytime you have a serious fall where you hit your head and you have brain injury, whether it's just a concussion or something more serious, then I definitely encourage you to receive treatment, to get treatment. And then it will support your brain in being able to heal itself all along the way. When people have major head injuries and they don't receive treatment for a long period of time, healing is still possible. Healing is still possible all the way until you die. Healing is possible. It just takes longer. So just like anything, the longer you are in a pattern, the more work it is to get yourself out of it. Anytime a state, a negative state, is normal for you, normal for your body, it's used to it, this is the way it is possible to change it. It just takes some work getting there. If you are really stuck, if in your beliefs you think of yourself as like, well, this is my life, having these injuries, this is the way it is, I can't do this, I feel that, all these things. If that's my normal, I'm not moving forward. I'm not choosing to take actions that help me heal. I'm not choosing to take actions that bring me to a different place. So if that's my normal, it is possible to heal. It just takes more. I have to get myself out of that normal into a place of change, into a place of moving forward and taking action. And the longer I've been in that place of stuckness, staying where I am, when I heal, it's like I have to get all the motors running. I have to get the process of healing started again. Because if my body has settled into its sense of what normal is, it's going to stay there. Unless I, through force of will and intention and taking consistent action, I pull myself out of the inertia of normal. And that's what makes leaving normal possible, to find a new normal. And there be maybe sequential levels of normal. So it's like I was just talking about this as I'm writing the Spectrum of Anger book for head injuries, because that's what I'm doing now. It's like there's this climb, and I'm at the peak, and am I going to move forward? And it's like, okay, I move forward, and then I settle on a new normal. So it's like I go up, I'm at the peak, I make a decision, I leap, and then I go down to a normal. And then it's like I'm on my normal, and it's like, time to go up again. There's another peak, another decision to make. It's like, okay. And then I settle into a new normal. This is what we do. We go up and then down, and up and then down, up and then down, with normal moving levels. That's what the healing journey is like. It doesn't all happen at once. It's stages. I go. Oop. And then I'm at this level number. It's like, it's time to grow again. A new normal. That's what healing is like. And how long it takes depends on how actively you are taking the steps that move you up. How often, how intensively, how consistently are you in your mind thinking thoughts of moving forward, taking action? How often do you reach that point of, I have to make a decision and it's really uncomfortable and I don't know if I can do it. Am I going to go back? Or am I going to move forward and find a new level of normal? So that all determines how long it takes. So thank you for this Better Brains Brief. We can see how much I was inspired by having a question. So give me questions. I love answering them. Thank you. See you next week. I'm Sandra Lee. I'm Sandra Lee, brain restoration specialist and intuitive sound healer. If you have a story about brain injury or about forgetting things and, whatever your story is, I'd like to hear it. You can schedule a share your story call with me. It's just 10 minutes. Not a sales call, just looking forward to hearing your stories. Thank you.